When your current reality stops supporting your own evolution, maybe it's time to try some new methods. Welcome to Remember Your Powers. I'm your host, Amandha B. Zhane, and today I have a very special guest. You may have heard of him, especially if you've gone to Sedona, Arizona, a place where many go for pilgrimage, for healing, and where I spent a good portion of 2 years. Welcome, Pete A. Sanders Jr., an MIT trained scientist who's really devoted your whole life to now showing people how to tap their own superpowers. Welcome, Pete. I see you're in Sedona. You've lived there for a long time now. How are you doing today?
Overall, very well, and happy to be with you and with your fellow seekers who may be watching this.
Thank you. I'm very drawn to you because, like you, with the scientific background, I've been a journalist for 15 years and also trained with healers who are more scientifically minded. My meditation teacher is Dr. Deepak Chopra, and I'm also drawn to you because you have the science to back what we experience in our consciousness as deep healing. And it's interesting to bridge these two worlds. I feel like we're somewhat of ambassadors, Pete. Do you agree?
Well, I think it's always important to let people know that they have choices that don't have to be either or. That instead of yes, but, it can be yes, and. How do you use the best of science and the best parts of faith for creating inspiration that lasts, that isn't just temporary?
And inspiration, a major word there, because I found that when I lost it all, job, marriage, home, the family pet, everything, I felt drawn to Sedona, and it seemed to be calling me out of my typical routine. And now I know this scientifically is I I had these neural pathways that were patterns of behavior and thought that created my reality. And so being drawn to Sedona really got me out of that reality and opened me up to a whole bunch of new possibilities. And I wanted to see if you could explain some of the things that I experience when I go to Sedona. You yourself, after time in Massachusetts and traveling for 5 years, testing your theories in the field, you took up residency in Sedona. Why were you drawn to Sedona, do you think?
Well, traveling the world as a top secret cleared nuclear weapons authentication naval officer, I visited sacred sites everywhere I went. Sedona has the best combination that can trigger what I call the Vortex Effect, trying to help people learn to not limit themselves to just a single site, but to understand the brain science and the physics that can allow them to make the most out of a visit to Sedona, or how to be a vortex for insight, no matter what site they're in, and to help them realize that the foundation of everything you just said is that we actually have this entire layer of the brain called the limbic system that is designed, for the most part, to keep us struggling, and usually that means unhappy. And when someone has the type of loss you describe, yes, there's that pain, but it also strips away a lot of the maintenance functions that can keep you living limbically rather than tapping what a pure atheistic brain scientist would call higher consciousness, what someone who has faith would say keeps you from your connection with the divine or the infinite. And having that stripped away, people intuitively know there's more. You know how most of an iceberg's below the water, only little sticks above? They realize, wait a minute, there's more. The above the part of the iceberg is real, but there's more. And if I can find out how to feel it, how to, more importantly, live it, I can be living life as a soul. I can be healing hurts, not holding grudges. And Sedona does have a marvelous power to do that. a non-partisan, non-religious group of Sedona people decades ago described Sedona as a cathedral without walls. So people of all faiths can come and feel that benefit.
As you say that, I have chills over my entire body. It's not just because we're in cold Utah, but I've experienced that full acceptance when I go to Sedona, that no matter who you are, what your background is, what your social status is, how much money you have, that you will go and be greeted with warmth. And I was talking to you in email, preparing for this interview, telling you how I'm a planner. Well, a lot of us are. And so when I go out to Sedona, it's very, outside of the norm for me to just go off of intuition. But when I'm in Sedona, I don't make a plan. I follow my intuition, and I'm always guided to the exact right people and places that advance my, what I now know as the hero's journey, where I'm evolving on my path. Why do you think that it takes me getting outside of my life, heading to Sedona to experience and allow myself to live in that intuitive state? Is it the energy vortexes?
It's the combination of factors that help dampen down the sour of the limbic brain. I had one brain science course at MIT that our expression was, oh, this is going to be a nothing burger. Easy A, but not real content, because I, was accepted to Harvard Med School, chose to go into this work to help people heal on all levels. And, it was on how the five physical senses worked. And I kind of studied ahead. I knew the retina, the cochlea. Well, we got to taste, and this professor developed a tablet that you chewed that for 1 hour completely knocked out your sour taste buds. And we sat there in class eating raw lemons and tasting the sweets in the lemons that you never taste because the sour so dominates. Well, this limbic layer of the brain is like the sour taste bud of the brain. And in many ways, that's what keeps people from seeing the blessings around them, feeling the love of the infinite. Is it's hard to see the sweets and the gratitudes when sour's so dominating. Now, on a separate note, I'm a hopelessly proud hubby. My beautiful bride of 45 years, just the other day, is Sedona's longest continuous serving public school teacher. She's on her 42nd year and 16th principal, and I only don't get in trouble when I tell that story if I say I married her when she was 9, but we met in college and I'm 71. So, but I'm exposed to a lot of the brain science for regular education through her. And it's not just about, memorizing times tables or grammar, spiritual learning, the quest. What is your purpose for the next phase? If you keep seeming to return to old hurts triggered by limbic, and people say, well, why am I going through this again? That can be a soul retention problem. And so there's something called the 5 elements of a brain compatible learning environment. And when you put those 5 elements in everything, you learn faster, learn deeper, and retain better. And one of them is choices. And when you're on a quest, see, I founded my organization on the phrase, make life a quest, not a test. When you're dealing with day-to-day survival, you're in test mode. Everything's a struggle and it feels heavy, and you're constantly being bombarded by sours. When you're on a quest, you have choices. And that's one of the key elements of that brain compatible learning environment. You feel like I'm going to follow my intuition. And I have more to say about the brain science behind intuition later. Trying to not just ramble too much here. But when you feel you have choices, you're more in tune with what's best for you for that next phase. Now, I love Sedona. I love welcoming people in Sedona to my weekly Vortex talks, but I'm all about not just temporary relief. How can you get skills for sustainable wellness? And let me give you an example. What makes people not feel like they have choice back home is responsibilities. Is that a test word or what? Well, let's say it a little different. Response abilities. How can you use the circumstances you're stuck with? And, the only thing more stuck than military is prison. And so I had some pretty stuck circumstances, a lot of great travel, but I could choose to say, well, I'm going to practice using my intuition to see where do I want to look more for that ship that's just over the horizon that we're playing a war game with, and how can we sneak up on them, or how can I sit in my stateroom and run like an intuition radar around the ship, sensing each of the places my men worked all across this huge World War II cruiser. It was the fleet flagship for the Mediterranean Fleet. And whenever I felt something like people goofing off, I got up and went there. And they could never understand how Mr. Sanders got there right when they started goofing off. And I kind of put them back to work. Everybody finished on Thursday. I gave the whole division Friday off, except for the duty section. They got Monday off. Bottom line, the division turned around. They had great pride in themselves. I got promoted early and wound up working directly for the captain of the fleet flagship. So that's kind of an example of using those in life. And that was skills that I developed and put in my books because I had spent time personally doing the type of quest you're talking about.
It helps you break the mold so that you can then start to merge what you experience spiritually with your physical reality, correct?
And again, I like the word you used, merge, rather than we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You can keep the fundamentals that we have to live in society, but just be more than just the tip of the iceberg.
And I love that. I tend to do things the hard way, Pete, and I spent the last 2 years, every month going to Sedona. I've lived in an RV and I got myself into a lot of debt. And when I see clients now in my shamanic healing sessions, they want to go on these vision quests. And I'm telling them, just plan it. Give yourself a nice little container and then go and experience it. And that's how you can do it the easy way so that when you come back, you still have your physical life because that's very important. And what I found helps merge the two realities for me is ceremony. And I found myself when I'm in Sedona, because when I started going to Sedona after all of the loss, it was about December 2020, and I was already a trained yoga instructor and meditation teacher, and I had been on a spiritual path for a few years already. So I found myself at these sacred sites in Sedona doing particular ceremonies, and that was new for me. So I would bring, a feather that I found or something dear to me, and it was like I had these intentions sitting down at these sites. For example, Montezuma's well, I was, processing a lot of grief. So I found myself like taking things from my dog that passed and that sort of thing. And then when I would go to Bell Rock, another beautiful a vortex site in Sedona, I would take some of the spiritual healing items that I had up to the top and bless them and also send intentions out to the world. So I was doing that kind of thing for the course of a year and a half before I found your book. And then I finally picked up the book, read it, and I was like, why didn't I have this the whole time? Because it explains exactly what I was doing. I was working with the inflow energies and the upflow energies. And also there's lateral energies, like I'm right here on a gully, and I feel like that's a lateral energy. So it's interesting that doing those ceremonies, in the physical world in certain particular areas of nature really bring the spirit energy to life. I don't really know how to describe it, but does that sound like it makes sense when applied to your
Well,
methods?
first of all, lot there, so let me address it bit by bit. One of the things we know in brain science is you actually retain better when you don't know an answer to a question and then you hear it or find it. So the fact that you had those experiences before you found the scientific vortex information book meant that it encapsulated better. And, the book is very comprehensive. We won't be able to go into all of it today, but inflow vortexes, valleys, canyons, caves, sinkholes like Montezuma as well, do help you go inward for healing hurts from your past. And upflow sites like Bell Rock, mountains, mesa tops, they assist any prayer or meditation where soaring for connection to the infinite, or as you said, releasing something up is facilitated. Now, I want to back up to something you said, because I think it's very important that everyone needs hope. It directly soothes that limbic part of the brain. And when someone, for whatever reason, is not in the position to do the type of vision quest you did, the length of time. In my case, I lectured out of MIT for a couple of years, and then mine was putting 75 pounds of gear on a bicycle and going around the US for a year before doing the voluntary service as a naval officer. When someone, for whatever reason, doesn't have that length of time, you can make momentation vision quests. And it can be just taking an afternoon. Key thing when you were talking about ceremonies, the word you used, we want to emphasize for people, is intention. And if someone is young children or job structures where they can't get away, if they can find pockets of time, and that can be as short as an afternoon, where they can dedicate that time to a vision quest and do ceremonies that work for them. And I actually, when we had the pandemic shutdown and people couldn't be coming to Sedona for some of the private sessions that I offered, I did a DVD called Sedona Vision Quest, which teaches a system for how to get unstuck for the rest of your life anytime you feel stuck. And this is one of the techniques from that. And I want to emphasize, learning skills and method means you don't just learn philosophies, you learn actual techniques. Response abilities is a philosophy. Quest, not test, is a philosophy. Here's the technique. And we're going to try and show this as best we can on the screen. And people can do it with us. But hold up one hand like this. In that hand is everything you've ever done in this life, good or bad. Hold up the other hand. Same way. In that hand is everything you still hope to do. Now, cross the midline in front of you and bring it down and give yourself a hug. This is probably the most foundation ceremony, because when you don't feel good with yourself, nothing works. And when we've gone through trauma or we're under a lot of stress, we don't feel good about ourselves. And if you open up intuitively in that environment, you sense all the negativity. So you always got to start with cherishing yourself. The other foundation technique is a technique I call the soul shift. And I just want to say that is so important that I give that away for free. Anyone can go to my website, freesoul.net, and at the top of the home page it says Free Soul Videos, and they can be led through the soul shift. And it's a way to, in minutes, get in dimensions beyond that superstrings physics says we exist in. And just so people know, I believe in keeping it simple. Superstrings physics basically says we all exist in 10 or more dimensions, not just the three of space and time, but these dimensions beyond, which definitely the infinite is, and what many people would think of as the divine. And when you are only living the upper part of the iceberg, you're more stuck in that struggling limbic brain. When you can connect with those dimensions beyond, which is what upflow vortexes help people do. When you know the soul shift, you can be a vortex, even if you're not on a bell rock or sitting on a mountaintop in Utah. And it's important to have choices. And if someone thinks, oh, I can't do a vision quest unless I can get on a bicycle for a year or travel to Sedona. I mean, we love having people in Sedona. I founded my organization here. It is still the best combination of characteristics. But I want people to know methods for when they can't get here yet.
I think we share that passion of bringing this to everybody. And nature herself provides this to us, and we're here to explore this life on nature. So thank you for interpreting, her energy and the universal energy. And it's so beautiful to see how you can use your scientific background to explain these phenomena and help us merge, because we're all interconnected. It's all interconnected. And I feel like when we commit to trying something new just to start that new neural pathway, or like when I was leveled in my life, let me go to Sedona and see what's there for me. I feel like you open up to the infinite possibilities and those 10 dimensions plus, where anything's possible for you. So we have like a lot of methods to access this, and you have multiple books, multiple DVDs. You're coming out with a children's book as well. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, do you feel that what we can do in our daily lives right now, other than just accepting where we are, breathing, is to work with children?
And working with children also includes ourselves. We
Mm,
are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars.
mm.
Uh, the the fundamental concept of quest, not test, means you make it an adventure. And that is one of the beauties of childhood, is that we're allowed to be exploring. And see, the nice thing about exploring or pioneering is you're never lost. You're exploring.
That's
You're
so
always.
interesting. I hate to interrupt you, but that's so interesting because when I go on these quests to Sedona and the surrounding areas, I do tend to purposefully get myself, quote, lost, because I know that coming back is going to be a journey, and I learn such valuable lessons every time. And I've prepared myself before I go, like survival training, firearms training, wilderness skills, mapping skills. But other than that, like, it just shows you that, well, it shows me that I'm capable of whatever comes my way. So I've learned that I can now integrate these skills into my physical reality, like showing up at a job, and maybe there's someone there today that isn't going to be friendly to me. I can handle that now because I can call on those skills that I learned on the quest, because I'm still on the quest, that sort of thing. Like, life is the adventure.
So your foundation for years was structure meant limbic. And in some ways, you're when you don't have rigid structure, I call it having a rough draft that allows you choices. It helps you not go limbic. And it's almost criminal that kids aren't taught more about the limbic brain, and how to counter it. The bless her heart, Goldie Hawn has an educational foundation. She's had a mental health foundation for decades, but Her educational foundation for children is called mindup.org. And, you know, I just was so impressed. Uh, she said, kids, the amygdala, which is a major part of the limbic brain, is like the barking dog. And it keeps us on edge. And the prefrontal cortex is the wise old owl, and it wants to learn. But when the barking dog is, it can't learn. So we're going to take a brain break, and we're going to sit down and we're going to pet the barking dog. And the host said, oh, yeah, meditation. I teach my kids meditation and mindfulness. And she was very clear. She goes, you know, this isn't that. This is physiology. This is neuroscience. That it's not a religious thing. It's basically learning not to let dinosaur old parts of the brain degrade your happiness. And that's why I went and did the Access Your Brain's Joy Center book is teaching adults how to trigger mood elevation fibers that counter limbic and give a mood boost. But I also found that kids need that. So I'm very excited, as you said, we have a new book just out. Alice makes an amazing discovery where she learns to quiet her limbic worriers and activate her septum soothers, because this proven part of the brain is an area called the septum pellucidum that has mood elevation fibers that you can learn to trigger like strumming a harp. And I was lecturing in Denver on this, and this doctor in the front row goes, what an amazing discovery. Such a shame it probably won't go anywhere and it's not going to make you any money. And I said, well, you know, money's not my prime mover because I founded my organization as a nonprofit, public ed, but why are you saying that? And he goes, well, duh, Mr. MIT. When you teach people where those fibers are and how to trigger them for themselves, they don't need you anymore. The real money is in a product that they have to keep buying. So it really helps if the product is addictive. And as a sidelight, limbic is soothed by nicotine, which is why vaping is absolutely running through teenagers. And he was right. My other books sell better. But where he was wrong is that this is in 5 languages. And for some weird reason, one of them is Czech. And I got an email from a Czech Special Forces captain who was using Chapter 1, teaching his men how to trigger those fibers to help with the PTSD relief and the stress of long deployments. And that's all I need in this life. And that did start me doing a lot for free with vets. I've taught at the Truman VA Hospital in the center of the country, all around the country. And we do have on our website a link vets can click to get help for free.
Amazing. You literally are a one-stop shop for healing and expansion and evolution, and really enjoying this quest of a life that we have right now. And thank you for all of the work that you've done and all the service you've uh, given us on this earth. And I would
And I'm
love,
going to interrupt you because I want to
please,
go, before I go too long, I want to make one clarification. I'm a one-stop shop for people being able to pick up methods that they can use to be their own best teacher. And those methods aren't tied to just me. I love giving the weekly presentations in Sedona, but the reason I've done the books, the children's book, the Access Your Brain's Joy Center book, is so that people have a way they can learn those skills that are independent of me.
that's what I love, that you're empowering people to take control of their lives or really surrender, however you want to look at it. It's all perspective, right?
And this is something separate because we didn't talk about it ahead of time,
Mhm.
but you've alluded to it in different ways. When I said my other books sell better, the one that sells the best was based on brain research I did at MIT for actual places to focus that turn up the volume on intuition and other higher senses. And this one, You Are Psychic, is actually close to 1 million copies sold in 7 languages.
Wow.
I just like to be clear with people. I do not believe in ESP, extrasensory perception. I believe in HSP, higher sensory perception.
Mm,
Your 5 physical senses, because they work through physical matter and energies, are the way we navigate in the 3-dimensional world. The psychic senses are the senses of those dimensions beyond. And I started to say this earlier, to me, soul is no longer just a religious term. I can talk to a complete atheist and say, you as a soul, and I mean all of your dimensions. So actually, HSP is higher soul perception, but people get no training in how to manage it responsibly. We are more trained to use earplugs with a snorer or sunglasses in bright light than we are to screen out, I would say, something between 50 to 80% of people's distress is they're actually psychically picking up other people's limbic stuff, and it's either rattling around in them or it's triggering old bruises. And so it's like adding to this dinosaur part of the brain that's already designed to make us feel miserable. And if we can bring all that into a practical living way where you can manage it, keep the windows closed or have them open but put screens in them during mosquito season, right?
yes.
Learn how to sense more accurately when you want to rather than just randomly.
That's amazing. We really, like you said, it's a disservice we don't teach kids about the limbic system. So thank you so much for putting that out soon. I'm so excited about your book, and thank you for all the methods that you have given us for lowering our stress, our blood pressure, for opening our, if my spiritual people, third eyes, and expanding your consciousness. And if you want to go to Sedona, get his book, Sedona Vortex information. And you have like literally every resource one could need. So go to freesoul.net. And thank you so much, Pete A. Sanders Jr. You are a gift to humanity. Thank you so much for your time and your service and dedication.
Well, thank you, Amanda. And the old saying, it takes one to know one. So I'm proud to be a part of that team with you and all the other fellow seekers that are watching this.
Thank you. Thank you for helping us remember our powers, Pete.
Bye for now.
A huge thank you to Spa Rhea. This podcast would not have happened without the support of its owner, Zhane, who supports and empowers women of all backgrounds, of all shapes and sizes, of all colors at her spa in Sandy, Utah, where they have the only M-tone sculpting cellulite blaster machine in Utah, among other things like the best hydrofacial in Utah. They have your Botox, your fillers, and the M Sculpt, which gives you 20,000 crunches in just a few minutes. Go out and visit them or go to sparhea.com.